Hi. I'm sorry the camera's so close, but with the lighting, if I move it further away, you can see that it does that, which isn't much good. I had a comment from the receptionist at the doctor's, which said that bothered him, saying like it shouldn't have done. And I'm asking myself, the reason I went into my triggers was because I felt that I was really going to lose it as someone if I didn't. But I've been in that place before. There was this bloke who was getting so fucking aroused over me, and it was really lascivious and really offensive. And I felt like I was going to lose it. And I just says to him, "You're hurting me." And he says, "Sorry." And it was a decision. It was a decision to keep myself safe from having the feelings that like I was really going to have a go at someone. Which was exactly the same as when I was feeling at that bus stop, before he even started, that I was going to lose the plot. And all I said was, "You're hurting me," and it all went away. All these feelings of stress and all these feelings of like I'm on the edge, and I feel like it would have been a better option than to go into my triggers, because when I go into my triggers, I just get more and more and more and more people triggering me in ways that I can't handle, because like when I go into my triggers, I'm off balance, and I can't handle what people are saying. Where this came from was Teal Swan's book, The Completing Process, where it says to go into the triggers. And I feel like this was a mistake. I feel like it led, because I got trigger after trigger after trigger and it was too much. And I started to really, really freak out and feel like I was going to do something crazy. I feel like the best option would have been to just hold my anger and just mindfully say like, "Look, you're hurting me." And if I say that from a space where I'm not triggered, like at the bus stop, I got an apology, and that was the total end to my stress. And I'm thinking that's the best way to deal with it. Like I say, when the receptionist said that bothered him, it's what it is it's this planet, I'm not from here. I'm from Tova in Alpha Centauri. And it's a completely different experience here. It's a completely different life, a completely different awareness, a completely different learning curve. It's a whole different genre of like learning how to cope with life. And I'm really grateful for the challenges that I'm going through, there was a hint that going into triggers wasn't a good idea, because I started staring at this girl, and one of the guys said, you're really staring at her. And that was because I was going into my triggers, and that was the person it made me. And if that's a person it made me, then that is a person who's going to get a lot more triggers. And but the thing is, when I was at the doctor's surgery, I started to feel so freaking stressed out that I felt I was at risk of like going into psychosis. And I knew that a way to get out of psychosis was to go into the triggers. But what actually happened was, it didn't help. In my feelings, in the way I was feeling, you know, it made no difference to the stress I was under. And that pretty much explains where I'm at. You know, I feel like, yes. Oh, excuse me. I've just got to put my mum's things by the door because I'm going to see her. I'm going to see her tomorrow. And I've got to put her things by the door. Ready for that. But it's funny how in life, let me just get rid of that there. It's funny how in life a person, you, me, anybody, can make these little changes. I mean, I think the great thing about it is that it's experimentation. And it is difficult because I went into a trigger once. I became fully psychotic, right? And I went into a trigger, and I was at home, so that may have been a part of it. I was at home, so going into this trigger, I was safe and there was nobody else who was going to trigger me. So that may have been a big part of why it helped and why it doesn't help when I'm around people. Because when I'm triggered around people, they can see the weakness in me and they will try to trigger me more and more and more. So it's difficult. It's difficult because I really believe or believed Teal Swan's book about going into triggers as like a way to literally get away from, you know, there's a trigger warning here. A way to get away from suicide is by going into the triggers, and it can literally save a person. But like I say, I was at the cathedral and I'd been going into my triggers and I found myself really staring at the girl. And I knew that I had a vibe. I had a vibe of, and it brought me back to who I was when I was younger, and it was a part of me that I really, really don't resonate with, and it's a part of me that I really, really want rid of. And I feel like going into triggers makes no difference to how much stress I feel. In fact, not only does it not make any difference to how much stress I feel, if I hadn't gone into my triggers, if I'd have just said, look, you're really hurting me, please stop, that would have been the end of it. That would have been the end of it, and that would have been the end of the stress. That would have been the end of my anxiety. And in that context, what really happened was my first mistake was not standing up to them just a little bit more and saying, look, you're really hurting me, please stop. Because the girl at the reception said, implied to me very strongly that what they were saying was nothing that should have bothered me. But for me to say, please stop, you're really hurting me, any decent person would have stopped and maybe even apologized for hurting me that way, and I would have walked away from there. The stress would have all gone, and that would have been the answer to the situation, because the stress would be gone and I would have been free to just carry on my day and not need clonazepam, not need clonazepam like tomorrow or the day after or the day after or the day after. Just to, my doctor was a little bit on point when she said, just tell him to fuck off. Obviously you can't tell him to fuck off because that's going to make him do it worse, but to be mindful and to say, look, you're really hurting me, please stop, and like I said, at the bus stop, I got an apology for saying that because he was coming on to me really hard and he was aroused beyond belief, and that arousal was going to drive him to start coming on to me in a really rude way. And I said, you're hurting me, and he apologized, and I don't know, because like I say, I stressed one time, right? I became psychotic like that after a stressful situation I went through. And what I did was I stressed about that situation. I said to myself, what could I have done better? How could I deal with this? What am I doing wrong? Can I make a plan that next time this happens, it's all okay? And I went into the trigger, but like I say, I was in my home, I was on my own, and there was no one around me who could give me, now, because that sent me off balance, yeah. And when people see you off balance, they comment, and they don't leave you alone. And like I say, because nobody was here around me, there was none of that. And just going into the trigger relieved the psychosis 100%. It went from a psychotic break back down to complete normality. And, I guess I guess in my life, I am learning some very interesting things, and I think this planet is a place to learn some very interesting things, but some things do come with pain, and deep emotional pain, but I think that's only to show that when something is done wrong, it can make things worse. I mean, I was at risk in that doctor's surgery of getting really, really pissed off. But like I say, I could have done it mindfully. I could have said, please stop, you're really hurting me. And they're decent people, and they would have left me alone. You know, I'd said it once. I said, you're hurting me. They carried on. I said, no, look, please, please stop. You're really hurting me. You know, um, and I think part of the reason that they were saying these, what I perceived as mean comments, was because like I say, earlier on in the day, I just had this feeling it was an experiment because Teal Swan says to do it, you know, and I wanted to try it out to let in all the triggers. But because I'd let in all the triggers, I'd got off balance. And when you get off balance, that's when you get a lot of people making comments to you. And that had carried through till when I left the cathedral, walked to the doctors and got in the doctors, and I just got a lot of comments, you know. And the doctor said that these comments were very abusive. You know, he said something about vision, which is he thought it was some kind of higher awareness, but that I didn't have. So I was a bit shitty because I didn't have this higher awareness, which is called vision. But the fact is that vision is just fuck psychosis. It's just delusion where people think they're all that because they're imagining things that aren't real. And they think they're better than other people, when in actual fact they're just delusional. And that was one of the comments that I got. So it was pretty serious closed-minded abuse, you know, but regardless, you know, the receptionist says that bothers him, you know, like it really shouldn't have bothered me. And yeah, so I'm leaning towards yes, I was getting pissed off, but to handle it in a mindful way and say, look, you're not listening. You're really, really hurting me with what you're saying. Please, can you stop? You know, but again, would they have stopped? Because, like I say, I was off balance because of earlier on, and that is when people really try to topple you over, you know. Um, so I'm really searching for the answers to all these things. And yeah, but this teal swan thing about going into triggers, I really don't believe in it anymore. In the way of like going into these triggers is what caused all this abuse, that it did help. It did help me get a lot of abuse that caused me extreme anxiety. I was really, really losing it. And I don't think that's healthy. And I don't think that's something that I want to do again. So I guess that's that, you know. Um, I guess that's that, because I have to take the warning of, like, I was so messed up. I was really emotionally hurting, and when I went into the doctors, I was crying, and I felt like I was going to lose it big, because I've lost it big before. I've nearly committed suicide because of incredibly huge amounts of fear that have come out of these situations and just sent me on a post-traumatic stress trip, that is just absolute emotional agony. And I was really scared of that. So when I was in the doctor, I was crying. And all because I went into my triggers and I didn't stand up for myself and say, look, you're not listening. What you're saying is hurting me. Please stop. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. It's not abusive. Um, and the more they make comments to me, the more that gives me the right to make comments back and say, look, you're hurting me. You're not listening. You're still hurting me. But again, I'd allowed the triggers in, so that put me off balance. So they felt they'd have a bit of fun and bring me down, you know. Um, and that's that. So that's the whole story. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.